Afternoon, and welcome to the Bellingham City Council Committee meetings. Today is Monday, November 21st, 2022. We're starting this afternoon with Public Works and Natural Resources. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Lillquist, so I'm going to turn it over to him at this time.
Thank you, Hannah. Joining me on the Public Works and Natural Resources Committee are Councilmembers Martins and Anderson. We have one item before us today, which is an update of the City of Bellingham Urban Forestry Master Plan, in particular the conclusion of Phase 2. The City of Bellingham is creating an urban forestry master plan. The purpose of the plan is to create a strategic plan that helps maintain a healthy and desirable urban forest through well-connected, consistent, efficient, and sustainable long-term urban forest management. Phase 2 on community values was completed on October of 2022, and focused on learning about community values, goals, and objectives for our urban forest. The results of Phase 1 and Phase 2 will inform the development of Phase 3, which is the actual plan itself. Staff are here to provide a summary presentation of the results of Phase 2 and discuss future work in 2023 to complete that master plan. I see both our Public Works Director and our Parks Director. This is an interdisciplinary effort. Who would like to begin presentation?
Just briefly, Mr. Lillquist. Yeah, so Nicole Oliver and myself, along with Annalise Burns, and also Blake Lyon and the Planning Department staff, along with Renee LaCroix. This is a citywide project. This is not something that's unique to one department. And as you look through the city's organization, you see different roles and responsibilities in the various departments, all of which are intended to protect and enhance and do what we need to do for our urban forests. And this development of the management plan is a continuation of that. So Annalise Burns is going to go through the Phase 2 of the management plan development. I wanted to mention that we are on schedule. So this was intended to be a 3-year process. We completed year 1 last year. We're in the middle of year 2 right now, or near the end of that, and anticipate the next step being Phase 3 in 2023, which is development of the policies. I just want to also mention that the city has a long history of preserving and protecting trees. Last year, I think the city planted about 8,000 trees in various places, many of which were very small, but they will eventually become large. So we have a great deal of commitment to our urban forestry and are happy to move this forward. One thing I will mention is about the public process, the public outreach process that Annalise is going to talk some more about. We've done some unique things here, the things that we have not done before in terms of how we've reached out for public input and feedback. And Annalise will talk more about that, but we're encouraged to see the volume of participation in this process. There are strong feelings on all sides of the questions when it comes to urban forestry, and we're happy to engage with that. But I really wanted to mostly focus on the fact that this is not a single department's project. Nicole is next to me for good reason. We're working closely together with the Parks Department to make sure that the city comes up with the best recommendation we can for managing our urban forest. And Nicole, anything to add to that before we give it to Annalise? Annalise, take it away.
Okay, thank you for the time. Again, I'm Annalise Burns, Habitat and Restoration Manager with Public Works Department. And as Director Johnston just mentioned, I come to council previously for the conclusion of Phase 1. That was in August of 2021 when I was here last, virtual, but still speaking with you. And now we're here to present the conclusion of Phase 2. And as Eric mentioned, also the community has long valued trees and forests. Another indication of that is that we are a Tree City USA community, and the almost 8,000 trees that was planted last year alone, that type of planting has been happening for decades at the city, and it's worth noting in multiple programs through multiple departments. Even so, we haven't had a strategic plan that has guided these efforts. So the purpose of a strategic plan, as Councilmember Lillquist mentioned, is to create a strategic plan that helps maintain a healthy and desirable urban forest through well-coordinated, consistent, efficient, and sustainable long-term urban forestry management. And we've been working on developing that plan since 2018. And throughout the process, we have continued to work with our existing programs and codes to continue to enforce protection of our urban forest and enhance the urban forest while we work on this plan. An overview of how the City of Bellingham is going about creation of this new plan. As Eric mentioned, it is an interdepartmental effort. It has involved the fire department, the planning department, the parks department, and the public works department. And the scope is the city limits, and the UGA, and we're talking about all trees and forests, including on public and private land. It's worth mentioning we've been guided through this process with the help of our consultant, Diamond Head Consulting. The intention of an urban forestry management plan is to inform our existing plans and regulations, including those listed here. This is a breakout of the scope of work. We divided it into 3 phases, a 3-year project, as Eric mentioned. And phase 1 was assessment, and we completed that in 2021. It included a variety of assessments. It's worth noting that some of the it used state and federal protocols that are established. And then some of the conclusions, just to remind you, we have about 40% canopy cover within the city limits, and that remained steady through the 12-year study period that we looked at forest canopy cover. There was losses and gains in different parts of the city, but the net result was a maintenance of 40%, and that canopy cover is not evenly distributed throughout our city. There are areas that lack it and areas that have more. Oops, let's go back. That was concluded in 2021, and I'm here today to talk about phase 2, which is community values. That phase has concluded. It was talking about community values, and we learned that through talking with the community. There was a large component that was community outreach to learn what the community's values, goals, and objectives are for our community forest, our urban forest. The results from phases 1 and 2 will then be used to inform phase 3, which is the actual plan. In that plan, the intention is to have then articulated what is our long-term vision for our urban forest, what are our goals and objectives, then strategies and actions that we can take to fulfill that vision. I thought it might be useful to give you an example of what a goal and an objective might look like as we're envisioning where this information is going. This is an example goal and objective that I'll read from Vancouver, Washington's plan. One of their goals was to preserve existing trees and institutionalize planning, maintenance, and operating principles that improve canopy health. So then from that, there was a series of objectives. One of them was promote tree-friendly development and land use practices, such as preserving mature trees and planning for appropriate replanting. So then they would take that and then build a series of actions and strategies to fulfill that objective. So that's where we're headed. This is a visual depiction of the timeline. Again, we've completed phase 1 in 2021, and then phase 2 is conducted from January to October 2022. It included community engagement, and then phase 3 has actually already begun. We started phase 3 in September, and we will be having a draft plan available for public review in spring of 2023. So there'll be another engagement opportunity for people to give feedback on that plan. Once we've incorporated their comments, we would come back to council with the draft plan. So phase 2, the rest of this presentation will be what we found in phase 2. And because it had community engagement and the purpose was to learn from the community, the first thing we did was develop an engagement plan to guide those efforts. And the objectives listed in the plan are to inform the public on the urban forest, involve the community in developing a long-term vision, allow feedback from all affected communities, identify opportunities to preserve, protect, grow, enhance our urban forest, and to build community awareness and support for the urban forest. So with those objectives, we developed engagement opportunities available in May and June of 2022, and we had a concerted effort to focus on equity and improved representation. We really wanted this to be a plan for everyone, so we needed to hear from all of the different communities within Bellingham. So these are some of the things that we did to try to increase representation. We had 24-hour online access of our materials. We had multiple venues and timeframes available for people to participate. We did our best to try to present the materials at a 5th grade reading level. We offered Spanish translation for our written materials. We had ASL and Spanish interpretation for live events, and we had Vietnamese, Punjabi, and Russian interpretation upon request. We announced these opportunities to over 600 individuals and organizations, including neighborhoods, nonprofits, the education community, industry, and the development community. The opportunities that we offered were varied, as I mentioned. They included online reports and maps and videos so that people could understand what our urban forest was and what the status was for the city of Bellingham. We had an Engage Bellingham webpage open with 3 different ways that people could provide input. There was a mapping tool where people could place pins and tell us specific locations that they were interested in. There was a survey that they could take, and they could provide stories where they're more of a narrative form. We had 2 open houses, 2 technical workshops, and 5 targeted listening sessions and comment booths. So the outreach paid off. We're pleased with the level of participation. We had in Engage Bellingham, there was over 1,800 unique visitors to that page. There were 690 surveys completed, and at the events, 152 participants in those live events. And while we're pleased with that level of participation, it's worth noting that this is not a statistical representation of all the views of the entire population of Bellingham. The results that I'm going to be presenting are the results of the people who did participate, just the information that we got from these participation events. Still, it's more information about community views on urban forests than we've ever had before. So who did we hear from? The respondents to these engagement opportunities included, there were 96% of the participants lived in Bellingham. They represented all city postal codes. This is represented by the graphic on the right. The most common age bracket was 65 to 74. That represented about 22% of the people that participated. 80% owned a home and 19% rented. So now I'll go into what we heard. What did people say? What do they want? And I'm going to organize the results into 6 categories. These categories will be the same categories that the plan will be organized in. There'll be 6 sections to the plan. So this is how we asked the questions. So for vision, when we asked people what they envisioned for their urban forest, we had the top bullet is that they most valued ecological, climate, and health benefits. And that was when we asked them about different categories of benefits that urban forests can provide. So that graphic off to the right are the different categories we presented to them and said, of these categories, which ones did you most value? And ecological, climate, and health came up on top. The respondents envisioned more trees than we currently have. So more than the 40% canopy cover than we currently have, and increased equitable distribution of that canopy. And we also heard that they envisioned preserving existing trees to a greater extent than we do now. When we asked them about planning for our urban forest, the graphic off to the right shows that of the respondents to our survey, 80% of the respondents visioned increasing canopy cover over the 40% we have now. The highest community priorities, when given a list of specific priorities in categories, we wanted to know where urban forestry split out, and it was 3rd highest, and I'll show you a graphic that's in more detail about that in a second. And also, we heard on the planning side that the urban forest assessment does not capture small-scale site-specific information, and that is correct. This is a landscape scale analysis, and site-specific information would be a different level of analysis. So this is digging into that second bullet a little bit more. We gave them 7 different categories of community priorities, and we know these are not all the priorities that we have in the city of Bellingham, but they provide a wide diversity of the different priorities that our community has mentioned. And so it allows people to say relative to each other, where does urban forestry fit within? And this is in ranked order. So affordable housing was top, then climate resilience, and then urban forestry was next. And of course, after urban forestry was public safety, transportation, industry and job opportunities, and athletic fields. When we asked the participants about growing our urban forest, we heard a couple of different things. One, several individuals and on several occasions, they mentioned updating our street tree list to include more native trees, climate adaptive trees, and provide trees that have more shade and prioritized for food. We also heard an interest in improving the equity of the forest benefits that we have in the city and reducing impacts to vulnerable communities. And that is on two levels. One is trying to provide the benefits of urban forest to more people, more different types of communities within our city, but also to think about the impacts that forestry has on communities as well. So let's talk about affordable housing. So trying to make sure that vulnerability is addressed, but also that the benefits are equitably distributed. We also heard that the respondents were interested in us considering view corridors when we're growing the forest, ensure that there are still corridors and views that are special to Bellingham, and to facilitate increased planting for private residents on their own property so they can participate in growing the urban forest on private land. When we asked them about managing the forest, we asked them, how satisfied are you with the different levels of service that are already being provided? And the graphic off to the right were the different categories that we asked them about. They were most satisfied with the level of tree pruning and maintenance that the city currently conducts, as well as the tree planting. They responded saying that improvement could be in tree protection of existing trees, public education about trees and forests, and tree maintenance specifically in the city center, Cordata, and Sunnyland neighborhoods. And when asked if they'd be willing to pay a fee for increased services for urban forest, the majority of the respondents were willing to pay a small annual fee. Protecting the urban forest. So the areas or the ways that we ask questions about protecting urban forests, the responses were that they were concerned. We heard several occasions about tree loss. Again, this is that protection of existing trees, but also concerned about western red cedar decline. That's a climate-related issue. On public land, and that's what the graphic off to the right is, we were asking, on public land, what would you prioritize for where we should spend our time and money? And it was primarily in protection, so that was 58% of the respondents who was on protecting existing trees, and particularly along trails and our old growth forests. On private land, they felt that it was most important to have stronger regulations and enforcing our existing regulations, to provide a definition for heritage trees and protect heritage trees, and also to avoid disproportionate impacts to vulnerable and marginalized communities. And again, these are the views of those that responded, not necessarily a statistical representation of everyone in Bellingham, but those that participated in the outreach events. When we asked about partnering, what can we do to partner the community in protecting our urban forest and growing our urban forest, they suggested expanding tree planting and maintenance through partnerships. We do a lot of partnerships with nonprofits and other organizations, and we could build on the work that we were already doing. Increased education about urban forests and trees, and expanding our volunteer opportunities. We have a fantastic park volunteer program, and it's wonderful, but we kept hearing we wish there was more. And we could facilitate increased participation in the events that we already have through additional outreach and increasing the variety and timing of the timing and location of the events that we do provide, particularly for those that work or those that are not able to make maybe a regular Saturday, let's say. So next steps, that was the end of the results from phase 2, and I just wanted to mention, let me go back slide one more time. On the bottom of that slide is a URL, and that is available for anyone that wants to see the report. There's an engagement summary report that goes into much more detail about everything that I presented today, and that's available at that website, and I'll show that website in just a second again. For next steps, as I mentioned, we've already started phase 3. That started in September. And we are doing a code review right now and a current practices review with our consultant, and then comparing what we're doing and what our codes say with other jurisdictions. And they will be then taking all the results of phase 1 and phase 2 and that review that they're conducting right now to develop recommendations for the actions and strategies in a plan. And again, we'll come out to the public for review of that draft plan in spring of 2023. And after that, come with the draft plan to council. This is the website, again, where we have all the information available to date, including the engagement summary report. And if anyone is interested and wants to make sure that they're participating in that next round of review of the first draft of the plan, we encourage them to sign up for our email updates. So there's a link right there on our webpage where they'll be added to our email list and get a notification when that opportunity comes up. So thank you again for the opportunity, and I'll stick around for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Committee members, any questions? Well, I've got about 10. Where to start? First, just a comment. One of I was kind of interested to see that the economic benefits of the urban forestry was kind of one of the least valued benefits. I would suggest that the public is undervaluing the economic benefits. That when economists try to put a value on the quality of life benefits from an adequate forested city, it's enormous. And I think we miss that because we're already so fortunately situated, right? But if we didn't have trees, we'd know right away that we were at an economic disadvantage. So I think the fact that that was so kind of undervalued, it wasn't like a negative, right? Was simply because we've kind of got that one already well covered in a sense, right? We're already benefiting from it. So that's just a comment. So there was strong support for the current 40% canopy coverage, most preferring to increase that. But as you indicated, Annalise, that's 40% average across the city, which is kind of a useless number. And you said as much yourself. We're actually have areas which are very poor in terms of canopy coverage and very rich, which goes back to 2016 when I argued strongly and didn't get the language I wanted that had to do with tying our forest canopy goals to land use. So we already have a very elaborate system which recognizes the differences between regions throughout our city. We have rules, regulations, guidelines. It's called our land use and zoning regulations, right? I think we should tie much more clearly our canopy coverage targets to an already existing framework of land use where we already regulate what's on the land and how it's used. So I do know you mentioned the planning department is one of the partners in this. So I don't know who wants to speak to this, maybe you, Ms. Burns. What are the plans for integrating in phase 3 land use elements specifically in the recommendations with regard to canopy goals?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. It is something that we've talked about with our team, and that is what our consultant is reviewing right now. What are the other jurisdictions doing? Do they have canopy coverage targets overall? We see both. We see a single number for an entire city, or we see it by land use. And our planning department has done a fantastic job. I have to just put a plug in for our GIS team. They're amazing, and they've been working closely with our consultant to make sure that the land use analysis that was just updated was given to our consultant so that they can look more at what availability do we have for increased canopy coverage based on zoning. And they're looking at that analysis, and that's what they're grappling with, and will come out with draft recommendations. We don't know what the results of those recommendations are yet, but it's definitely within their view, and we heard you last time. It is definitely one of the priorities we've given to our consultant to look at that distribution by land use.
Because, for example, we have policies which are encouraging density in identified urban centers, and the degree to which we cover the land with buildings and houses people live in, we're cutting down on the possibility of having trees and open spaces. And so it's very clear that we should find a way to try to have it both. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of it. But a matter of fact, I think it's more specific than that. The way to get greater livable densities and make sure there's greenery in and amongst it. If and when the waterfront finally takes off, there'll be a huge park down through the middle of it, which is why it hopefully will be an enjoyable place to be. Similarly, you have like Fairhaven Village Green. It's small, it's half a block or less in the middle of Fairhaven, but that adds the necessary greenery. So in my mind, our goals for density, which might be seen as driving trees out, are the strongest reason for keeping trees in. So I mean, that's just one angle of land use. Lisa?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to tie into that, thank you for the plan, and I did appreciate how the effort was to get out there and try to be very responsive with how we reached as many people as possible. When this Phase 3 comes back, what I'm really going to be interested in is the interface with development and infill and the protection of the heritage trees. There's kind of this underlying feeling that we have to increase the density, and that increases the envelope of maximizing buildings on existing properties, ADUs, or perhaps, depending on what happens with legislation, if duplexes and triplexes are allowed in some of our older neighborhoods, how do we look at designs and standards in order to protect those trees and still have infill? And I think that's going to have to be a really robust conversation that I'm hoping we look at it as much as we need infill, we also need those heritage trees because of the value that they give. And kind of how Councilmember Lillquist, when we look at the economic value, I think if we can help better define that for the public to understand that shading has an economic value because they're not using as much air conditioning. Just stormwater runoff, all the things that our big trees are able to do, which help overall reduce some of the cost of living in a dense infrastructure. I think people might have thought economically as timber sales, and that's, if we can kind of look at what the value of the trees are, people might have a better understanding of the economic value of it. But anyway, when it comes back to us, I really hope strong work with planning is that partnership of how do we really do infill but still protect those big trees, because I don't want to see them cut down in order to put in a small housing unit in the backyard.
Throw the mic back over to you.
Go ahead, Christina.
Kind of coupling along with everything else that was just touched on, and the amazing community engagement that happened when going through some of the feedback. There were three that kind of tied together for me. One was the education about who's responsible for tree maintenance. Right under that was a lack of public education on how to maintain a tree. And then beautifully over in another theme was urban forestry for dummies handouts. And I love that idea. And since this incredible team has gone to such great lengths to engage the community on the first time around, can we expect something like that? That we will be able to easily communicate to people who did engage with this what the plan is now that is in very easily understandable terms coming the spring of next year into the summer?
Yes.
I was going to say, I already have a little star next to the urban forestry for dummies, so yes, I'll be.
I'm a little more in depth than that, though. We've put a significant amount of emphasis in the city departments on communications and improving our communications and doing it in ways that's received in the way that people are communicating with each other today. All right, so the classic city model of just send out a press release and everybody reads it. We need to find different ways to do that, and we're trying to do that. That ship takes a long time to change directions, but we're heading in that direction. The proposed budget for 23 includes funding for some of those activities, and we're learning to engage with our communications professionals as opposed to our engineering professionals on public outreach, and we're seeing the benefits of that. And this is a great example. One of the things I like in the report is not only acknowledges the comments that were received, but indicates how those comments will be incorporated into the next phase of the plan. So I say yes kind of shortly, but that's really reflective of the direction we're trying to head as the city departments.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the fact that the materials were you try to make them at a 5th grade reading level. And that's not to talk down to people, but it's really to avoid jargon. Even saying urban forestry master plan is full of jargon, whereas you say the trees throughout the city. You're not talking down anyone, but you're just speaking in non-jargon. I wanted to ask about the equity. That was one of people's concerns. And I think it's important that we understand and measure equity by location. And so that goes back to, for example, the park level of service equity tools, which I preached many sermons on, and now that our parks maintenance and growth is guided by an awareness, a regional awareness of equity issues. Similarly, we have the consolidated plan, which has to do with equity issues, economic issues, housing issues. So the city already has several ways of measuring, geographically speaking, areas of need. What is the thinking with regard to the urban forestry master plan of using the exact same tools, similar tools, overlapping them? What is the thinking there?
Yeah, that's another advantage of it being an interdepartmental effort is we worked with the planning department to use census data to figure out different types of demographics that we were interested in that's related to urban forestry. And my understanding, I don't know if anyone wants to speak on behalf of the planning department. My understanding is the 2020 census data is often the basis of what they use when they start mapping different types of vulnerabilities or different types of need. For urban forestry, we were looking at income, we were looking at race, we were also looking at health disparities, access to parks and open space and trails. So I think it's very similar to the type of categories that they're interested in other departments when they look at this information, and the 2020 census data is the most current information.
I think I'd use 2 more pieces of information, which I think we have, which is the percentage of children with access to free and reduced lunch. Mm-hmm. And the second one was, slipped my mind. I don't know if we have any data geographically, on a GIS layer, geographically speaking, but a percentage of households, for example, that are cost burdened for housing. I don't know if we have that at census tract level or at any level geographically speaking. But those are the sort of things that I think people mean when they say, what is an underserved community? What is the community in need? And does that area have equal or adequate access to the greenery, which can add to quality of life and health and other benefits? So I would hope to see an attempt to integrate those kind of data sources directly with recommendations in the plan. Committee members or other council members? Lisa?
So speaking of communication, Councilmember Littlequist and I had a meeting several weeks ago talking about, in the interim of this plan being finalized, doing some outreach and communication just so that the public is aware of the rules in place, especially in what would be city trees and right-of-ways. We've had situations in neighborhoods where people have just taken down heritage trees, whether it's unbeknownst to them that they should have had a permit and verify whose tree it is, and then some just willfully took it down knowing full well it was a city tree and decided to just take the penalty because it's a cost of doing business. So hopefully staff were going to go back and talk to legal and talk to each other to see if something could be done, whether we put information out there, if we do a mailing, or somehow use some of our resources just to inform the public of the rules that we currently have. Because I think that in the interim, until we have a full plan in place that gets worked out, it would be really nice to be able to maybe prevent some of these heritage trees of coming down until we have something strongly in place. So just this comment is a little bit for public too, that even though there's this big project going, there is the awareness that some of our large trees are coming down that perhaps shouldn't be, or at least should be looked at and permitted to ensure that it's done correctly. The other thing is, I hope as part of this that the measures, we can really look legally at what kind of enforcement whether there's penalties or how that is looked at. Because once we have a forestry plan in place, and it seems that a lot of the public perception is protection and expansion, I think the other side of that is we need to make sure that on the legal side, we've really kind of defined out what penalties will be in place. I think first education is the most important, collaboration, working with individuals, but occasionally you're going to be in that situation where people will do something that they shouldn't have. And right now, the penalties are so low that it really is a cost of doing business, and it's cheaper to just break the rules and law than it is to do the right thing. And I'm also hoping we can look at the replacement. If you take down a 100-year-old tree and you only have to replace, 3 seedlings or, ones that are 4 feet or 5 feet tall, it is not at all comparable to the loss that we've had. So I hope that will go into the plan, really looking at those elements to make sure that when I think of equitable, it's community, but also equitable to the environment and what we lose when some of these big trees come down that should not have been taken down. So just
Thank you,
thoughts.
Councilmember Anderson. I just wanted to let you know that those comments, you mentioned that when we came in August of 2021, and I just wanted to let you know we heard you, and we have expedited the review of those 2 items with our consultants. So they are looking at other jurisdictions in Puget Sound to say what is their replacement ratio and what are their fines.
Thank you.
So Annalise, kind of following up on that, late last year, Council requested a review of our current tree protection policies, and we got that briefing, I think, in April. And at the time, I think Ms. Wheel presented, and we identified a few areas where there were, at least what I described, and I think staff too described as gaps in our tree protection regulations. But part of the discussion at the time is the time to rewrite those tree protection regulations that have to do with is when this plan is finished, or as part of this plan, or that we would have as a recommendation from this plan when completed to update those specific regulations. I don't know about waiting that long. Is there, based on that presentation in April, how actively on your mind are the specific regulations we have right now, which really mostly are not written as tree protection regulations. They're land clearance regulations, which can influence trees, right? But they're not really tree protection regulations. Is there any work that's going on currently with regard to those regulations or in the work plans that the staff has? Will that wait until after this is finished? Will that come next?
I'll take that and look for some help from Mr. Lyon and Ms. Oliver if we need to get to that point. But our recommendation is that we do take the time for the process to develop the management plan and the strategies and the goals and the visions. And from that will come the changes to ordinances to put those plans into effect. This was intended to be a 3-year process. We're in year number 2. Year 3 is going to be shorter than a fire year. We won't be back next November, but we'll be back sometime in spring, summer of 2023. But we do recommend that we wait to make those substantive policy changes till after we've had a chance to incorporate the public feedback into the entirety of the plan and then move that plan forward at one point in time. If we were to move forward with interim ordinances or different changes, that would press a pause on the management plan because it's the same people doing the same work. So our recognition is continue on the management plan, present it in its entirety, and then do the implementation after the plan has been adopted, which might include changes to code. And Nicole and Blake
Thank
might.
you. I see Ms. Oliver and maybe Mr. Lyons as well.
Just wanted to add that in the interim, we made an interdepartmental commitment to identify any large trees on any new development plan and give them special scrutiny. And I have been provided information and added, our staff has been in consult on multiple projects since then in a different level than we have before. So internally, we made some changes in the way we were approaching projects, informing developers, and trying at the very beginning to identify bigger trees for protection just by working together. And I've seen a difference just since doing that.
That's good to hear. Mr. Lyons?
Thank you. Also wanted to mention that our staff is currently working on the clearing and grading draft ordinances that you're referencing as well. So that is being informed by this larger effort as well. So we're not waiting until that concludes entirely, but it does need to be informed by both. So they're, I would say, parallel tracks with the urban forestry management plan being slightly ahead.
It is more difficult to advance on multiple fronts, but I think that would be best, and I'm glad to hear that's sort of what you're trying to do. Council members, any further discussion on this agenda item? We will be hearing back hopefully in early April with the final recommendations. That concludes, that's the end of this item, and that concludes the Public Works and Natural Resources Committee. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. The next committee before us is planning, and that will start at 1:45, so we'll just take about a 5-minute break.